speaker is Dr. Anita Sarma, who is the Associate Professor of Oregon State University. And the title of the talk is Engineering Inclusivity into Your Products. So I would like to request Professor Anita Sharma to deliver her keynote speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's see if you are able to see my screen and you are seeing full presentation mode.
Yeah, we can see it.
All right. So thank you. This is like the perfect place, right? So this is where we discuss all our emerging research, and I have seen lots of people talking about cognitive style. This is awesome. And the title of the talk is How to Engineer Inclusivity into Your Products. And as academics know that courseware, the courses, the assignments are our products. And actually you can look at how inclusive your courses are. So let's start with, first question was like, how can inclusivity and software even matter? Like, how do they relate? And the answer is that most software has cognitive bias bugs that are embedded in the software. And now we have this very worried developers like, you are kidding, like where? Right? And it's in the software we create and the tools we use to create the software. And now the developer might ask like, oh my God, we have so much to do. We have tight deadlines. Does it really matter, this inclusivity bugs? And the answer is yes, it matters actually a lot, because it's like every time the user has to pay a cognitive tax when they hit one of these bugs. And another reason to care is if you make your software inclusive for one underserved population, you can actually make it better for everyone. And there is this concept of curb cuts. I don't know how many of you are aware, but after, I believe, World War I, people started noticing that it was difficult for people on wheelchairs to cross the roads in the intersections. And from there, the idea of curb cuts came, so that people, in wheelchairs with wheels can easily get off. And I think this idea, like all US has intersections with curb cuts, and I believe in Europe too. But what happened with these curb cuts was, yes, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but here the wheelchair people are getting better, but so are those who have babies in strollers, people carrying heavy weights, those in cycles, and hey, we don't want skateboarders, but yes, them too. And all of those people then used to travel with our suitcases, the roller boards, it helps everyone, right? So helping one underserved population, say those in wheelchairs this time, helped a whole bunch of population. So making your product inclusive for one diversity dimension, maybe gender, can actually make your product better for a whole wide range of population. With that thought, but before we go on to what you can do, let's talk about what not to do. Shrink it and pink it is not a good strategy. In 2009, Dell came up with these pink laptops, and it was the crazy, it was awesome. And along with it, they had a companion web page. And in that web page, they talked about recipes that women could use using this, the girls could use using this laptop, right? And there was a big backlash. So I invite you to tell me, like, how long do you think the website was on? Anybody want to guess? You can either write in the chat or speak out. I can't actually see the chat with the system I have, so there it is. Okay. Let's see what people are saying. 2 hours, 24 hours, guess lower. Okay, 5 minutes is a little too much. This is 2009. It was way early, but it was 20 minutes, right? And this is 2009, and before Twitter era, right? So there was still a lot of pushback. Having a pink laptop is awesome. I like pink and I like red, but it was the companion website that talked only about recipes, because women clearly would use the computer to get food done, was where the pushback was coming from. And then there was a worse thing, the big for her, where they made it slimmer, they put some cushy things, some of them had sparkles, and it's like, hey, big for her. And each pen was 13 cents more expensive, right? And there was another pushback. This is a little more recent. And Ellen DeGeneres in her show said, oh, my poor feeble hands, how would I have written before? right? So these strategies are not good because this is actually kind of insulting to the group that, oh, they need softer pens, or this is like dedicated to making recipes. But what is also bad is that using this pink it and shrink it strategies, what the products are trying to do is, and they're like interesting about baking recipes too, sure. But what the products are trying to do is they're dividing up the population, right? And first of all, gender, as we now know, is it's a very complicated construct. It's not binary. Like, so how would you even divide? And we should not think of the world as pink and blue population, but we should think about how can we make the software better? Like, how can we debug our software so it helps the whole population? So I'm asking like, okay, let's take a debugging perspective. So where do these bugs actually lurk? So this is from our research at OSU as well as other research. These bugs lurk in a whole slew of places. Like in open source, GitHub, there's a lot of conversation about that now. In programming environments, spreadsheets, even e-learning, where we are supposed to be empowering and talking about how to get girls educated, robots, websites. This was our ICSI website, and in 2016, a website that we actually did the GenderMag evaluations on, and we found a bunch of problems that were actually fixed. So shout out to Joe Atley and Thomas Zimmerman, who helped do the GenderMag evaluation, get some templates that future conferences have actually pulled up now. So what can you do about it, right? So how can we find this inclusivity bugs? You can use the inclusive mag method. So this is kind of the meta method, and GenderMag, which is one of the most famous child of the method, is just one entity. But the idea of inclusive mag is you first create the scope as researchers, what kind of software domain you're interested in, what is your diversity dimension of interest, right? In most of the talk today, I will talk about gender because I'm going to focus on GenderMag. And then you do the analysis and research and find out what empirical evidence exists here that you need to know which of these diversity dimensions, say facets or some behavior or needs are not supported. From this research, you come up then with your personas, and then you use the persona in a cognitive walkthrough to find your inclusivity bugs. So answer is, in this case, if the diversity dimension is gender, you can use the GenderMag method to find gender biased bugs. So let me go deeper into GenderMag. And for those of you who have not heard of GenderMag, this is a crash course on how to use GenderMag. GenderMag stands for Gender Inclusiveness Magnifier. So you're taking a magnifying lens and looking into where inclusivity bugs coming from gender biases lurk. And the process is you're evaluating your tools, which could be a software and even documentation. So your tools inclusiveness. And the scope of GenderMag is someone is doing problem solving. It can be a user sitting in front of the computer, scratching their head on, how to use Midspace or how to use an IDE, any kind of software tool or website. So anytime someone is trying to read and understand how to use something on the computer, can constitute problem solving. The key part of GenderMag, the main engine of GenderMag, is these cognitive facets. GenderMag uses 5 cognitive facets, and I'll talk about it in a little bit. And it embeds these facets into the personas. And then you use these personas, which are a representative of a range of users from these 5 facets in a cognitive walkthrough. These 5 facets, one is motivation. Why is someone going to use your tool, going to use your website, right? So there are 2 ends of the spectrum. Some people like to use the tool for the sake of learning because technology is fun. You can guess which gender more people like to do that. And on the other end of the spectrum is those who are task oriented. I'm using a tool because I need to get something done. Then there's information processing style. Some are selective processing style. For example, take the first small actionable unit of information and work on it. Others are comprehensive. They would like to get all the information about the task before starting it. Computer self-efficacy, low or high. And this really matters for software because those who are of low self-efficacy And when they reach a problem or get into trouble using the tool, they tend to blame themselves and are more often likely to quit, right? So this is not good. Learning style, the people would learn by tinkering, prodding, poking, finding things out, or more process oriented. And then risk averseness, how much risk tolerance they have. So what GenderMag does, it takes these facets and puts it into a persona. First thing to note is I don't want you to read everything, but the entire persona fits into one page. We wanted to keep it small. Anything above this blue line is completely customizable. What this persona, Abby's persona is, oh, I forgot to tell you. Sorry. We have this three sets of on one set, Tim's on another set, and then right. So that taking care of task orientation, comprehension around the one persona, and anything above you can change things. Below, and this is where you can put the pronoun of your persona as you. That is empirical study which has shown that individual differences cluster by gender, and these differences have statistical significance, and that's why we chose these 5. Let's take one facet, say risk aversion. So what this facet says is that Abby rarely has spare time. She's super busy. So she's risk averse about using unfamiliar technology that might need her to spend extra time on them now. For example, for those who are in industry, you have a feature coming up that you need to deliver. So you would use an older workflow that might be more expensive time-wise or other ways, more buggy, and you use that workflow because you know that workflow and you're comfortable with it. For example, if an academic, I have a research proposal to submit and the due date is coming up very soon, and NSF, National Science Foundation, at least in the US, has this new technology of how to write your bio versus a very buggy, half the time it doesn't save, but a fillable PDF, which I have to keep changing every time. But I know how to use PDF fillable versus this new technology, which I tried, it was confusing, so I didn't want to deal with it. Right? So I'm taking a older route, which is more buggy, and I have to do more effort for the next proposal I submit. But it's still easier for me to do that than learn a new familiar technology based on what time I have. So here is let's dive deeper into one of the studies that looked at risk. In this study, we only had 2 genders, men and women. The yellow lines, bars are for women, and the blue bars represent men. The first thing to see, there is no division of yellows and blues, right? It's not a divided world. There is a lot of intersection. But then you also look at the distribution. More women tend to fall in this study on the risk averseness part, whereas more men are on the left-hand side on the risk tolerance. And here is this line. This line is important because more often than not, most software is built for this section of the population. And if that happens, what does it mean? It's leaving behind 50+% of the men, and it's leaving behind 75% of the women. And this is why not being inclusive of cognitive facets makes it not inclusive of gender, right? This is the distribution. So what GenderMag tries to do is like, okay, here we have our personas. So it is Tim's job to look out for all the people on this end of the spectrum, and it is Abby's job to look out for people at this end of the spectrum, right? And the idea is if you get Tim's comfortable and Abby's comfortable, you have gotten everyone in between. And then we have the Pats who are for looking out for the people in the middle. So kind of repeating the same thing. So Abby's as one end, Tim's on the other end. But one thing to note is that humans are messy, right? So facets depends on individuals and also situations. So here is where I fall. right? I am very, as I already talked about, very task oriented. I do not want to learn any new technology unless I have to. I just don't have the time to figure things out. But I'm a very selective information processing person. And this usually works for me because I'm busy. I read stuff and I do things, but sometimes it actually comes to bite me. And this was a perfect case. I was being a PC chair and we had to set up this hot CRP conference reviewing thing. It's a nightmare. So I was like, oh my God, I have to do it. So I spent some time. I went instruction by instruction by instruction. 45 minutes later, there is this line that says, oh, we, the managers, can actually set it up for your conference, and we would actually prefer that we set it up for you because otherwise there's another 20 steps you have to do to give them access in the particular way. I'm like, oh, if only I had read the whole email, right? It would have saved me so much time. So in most cases, selective processing helps me, but sometimes it gets to bite me, right? So the idea is this not that one style is good and the other style is bad. It is just different styles, and the tool needs to support. I tell my students, bullet points, prioritize the bullet points, right? So tell me upfront what is the one thing, if I read from the email and I don't read the rest, what is the one thing you want from me? Oh, it went back up. So, and computer self-efficacy, risk averseness, I'm kind of in between. Tinkering, process oriented, it really, I'm in between. I'm a pat because it depends on how interesting the work is, the tool is, and how much time I have, if I would learn by tinkering or not. So now that we know about the process, what does GenderMag do? It gives you a systematic approach to doing debugging for inclusivity issues. So we call it the why, where, fix model. Why tells you why there might be an inclusivity failure. So it's like testing, right? So instead of test cases, what you're using is you are using these personas and these facets to test your tool features against this facet to see why the problem would be. And the next part is the where, right? This is analogous to fault localization. So now you know the why. Now can you find out the where? And using this, why the problem is, where the problem is, you can do the fix. So let me walk you through a little bit more with specific examples. So how GenderMag works, right? So you first pick a persona. Let's say I pick Abby here. Then you pick a use case or scenario for your tool. Here is a mock-up of a augmented bookstore that one of our HCI class projects did. They basically tried to make it AR in the mobile. And you pick a scenario. In this case, they said, this is you, meaning this is the designer, what kind of use cases they want. And here it was, find science fiction books. And then the evaluators walks through the scenarios with intended sub-goals and actions like this. So the sub-goal one, which is basically a goal they are thinking the user has in their head, which is see a bookstore map, right? So that's in the bookstore map. And then you ask in the evaluation, which usually has 3 people, you find your page and then you say, okay, will Abby have formed this sub-goal? And the answer can be yes, sure, or no, or maybe you're sure, maybe not. And when you're doing this evaluation, we try to be inclusive. So hear everybody's word. So it's not, you don't have to reach a consensus. We just collect whenever whoever is saying yes, no, maybe. And if an answer was no and maybe, you ask why. More specifically, you consider Abby's facet. For example, here someone could say, like, considering Abby's motivation, which is task-oriented, seeing bookstore map, why would it matter? Because they just want a science fiction book. They might not think of looking at the map in general. Whatever be the answer, even if it is no or maybe, we stuff the sub-goal in Abby's head because, hey, it's a persona. You can do that. And then you move on to the actual actions, the features, the buttons that your tool has. And here, the students thought that they would have to actually tap browse off to see the map. And then you ask the question for the particular action as a before question. Will Abby know what to do? And again, yes, no, maybe, why. And here you can consider, say, Abby's tinkering. Would Abby be prone to just poking this particular purple button which just says browser off. Maybe not, because she doesn't like to tinker on her own. Then you take Abby's hands and click on the button, right? You take the action. And then in this case, I don't have the next screen, but it goes to the next screen. And then looking at the product of the action, the new screen, new documentation, whatever comes out, you ask, if action was taken, would Abby see progress towards her sub goal? Again, you do yes, no, maybe, why. And here I'm saying maybe looking at Abby's motivation, she wouldn't know why she is looking at this particular new screen that comes up. But what you have done is you have taken a use case, broken it down into sub goals, things that the user is thinking of doing, and specific actions you think the user would need to do. And your no's and maybes give you bugs. If there is a facet involved, and sometimes a facet may not be involved, it's just a usability bug. But if a facet was involved about why a Abby would not take this action, then that becomes an inclusivity bug. At the end of the GenderMag evaluation, you then get a list of bugs, a subset of which would be inclusivity bugs. Some examples. So this is an academic software. In this case, the evaluators found in 46% of the questions, sub goal and action before, after questions, no problem. 3% were just usability bugs, not a facet problem. 51% if there was a facet involved. Conference website, this is ICSE and ASC websites, 2016 and I believe 2017. 87% of the questions we had asked involved the facet, so inclusivity problem. Peer production site, this was a Wikimedia project, 42% inclusivity bugs. Taking a step back, there has not been a single team that we have looked at that has found zero inclusivity bugs. This is data from a set of 17 teams we had looked. The smallest percentage is 12%, but here is a bigger percentage. 100% of those questions had an inclusivity bug involved, right? This is really bad, but actually it was really good. They did this with paper prototypes. What that meant was they could very easily change their prototype to make the changes, right? So now that we know, yes, gender bias bugs exists across spectrum, what can you do about it? So here is where the fixes come in. So you have found which facet is causing this problem, where the problem is. And now, analogous to just fixing a bug, you take the facet and see how you can help with that facet to remove the bug. Here's an example of a open source team that wanted to look at their contributing MD to see if there was any inclusivity bugs. To start with, this project was especially geared to help newcomer onboarding. It was a newcomer onboarding project. So they did a really great job of actually writing out in their contributing MD of setting up environment, step-by-step instruction, which is great for process-oriented learners, not tinkerers. But even then, they wrote out the instructions for Linux, but not for Mac or Windows people. So when they did the evaluation, they found, so they are expecting Abbies who have Mac or Windows to go out and tinker on their own to figure out how to make it work for that OS. What they did as a fix, they made a higher level of abstraction. So they said, okay, if you're a Linux, if you're a Mac person, they didn't have instruction for Windows, so that's what it is. On the operating system, a user could go to that operating system and then they would have the steps listed out, right? So now the Abbies who would have a Mac would not have to tinker on their own and figure out, if the Linux steps would work for them. We then wanted to see if actually doing these fixes helped or not. We did a user study with 18 participants, 9 per group. Basically what it means is 9 of the participants did the user study. We gave them the same use cases that the GenderMag evaluators had used. and we asked them to finish the task. And for this bugs, the inclusivity bugs that the open source team had found during GenderMag, we wanted to know if participants would also face that problem. And yes, they fix. Then we had 9 participants use the enhanced version. We are calling it diversity enhanced version, the after version, and only 2 places people fixed bugs, right? So GenderMag actually helped reduce the number of inclusivity bugs faced by real users, participants, by about 90%. So next question is, this is great, it helped users, but what about equity? Did it actually help? So what we did is, when we had the participants, we did a survey. We call it the facet survey. So individuals mentioned, based on a set of, I think we have 14 questions, what their styles are. We can calculate that. And then we looked at, instead of looking at per participant, we looked at per facets. And what we found is, in the pre-version, first version, there were 14 instances where Abby facets were affected versus only 5 facets for Tim, right? There's this big difference. In the post version, still there was a little bit of a problem. There were 2 Abby facets, basically two participants who had 2 facets that had problem with, versus 0 of Tim, right? So the inclusivity fixes did make the project more equitable, but it also actually helped the Tim. And this whole data I'm presenting is only for the first bug. We call it bug 1 and 2 because we combined 2 bugs from the GenderMag evaluation. So that got us to thinking, okay, let's actually look further to see, did making these fixes for Abby hurt the tips, or what was happening? So here is a little bit of a graph, but it's a little overloaded. What this graph is saying is the human participant in the post version for this particular facet did not face the problem, but faced a problem in the pre-version. A negative would mean the opposite, right? They didn't face a problem in the pre-version, but they faced a problem in the post version. Gray means that bug did not appear in the pre or the post. This is a very nice data which shows that for each of these facets, it helped the Abbeys. And it also helped the Tims. There was no case where the Tims were actually hurt, right? So what actually happened is the inclusivity fixes that were made by the open source team made the project more inclusive to both Abbeys and the Tims, right? This is the classic curb cut data here, like it helped just make the software better. But what about gender, you might ask? Hey, this is a gender-based workshop, right? So here is the distribution of men and women along the facets. So the first thing to note is, like, there is only one person, and women are denoted in orange, men in blue. We only had one person who declined to state they were men or women. So we have at least one non-binary data point here. There's one person, one woman who was a pure Abbey, and one person who was a pure Tim. Everyone else was a mix, right? And that's what our data has time and again shown. But what we do see is this distribution. More women fell in the Abbey facets than the men. And therefore, when the Abbey, that equity box, when the Abbeys were like, this is not equity, it's the equality at this point, because, the software needs to support both Abbeys and Tim. When the software supported the Abbeys, what it did was also support the women, right? So that's why doing GenderMag and making your software more inclusive of the facets actually makes it more inclusive of gender too. So many of you are like, awesome, I like it. And many of you actually have done GenderMag. But one of the things that always comes back to us is like it is time consuming. It takes at least 1 to 2 hours per session. It needs 3 people per session. And oftentimes you get through to maybe in the first few cases where you are still new and figuring things out, maybe 2 use cases. As you keep doing more, it gets better and faster, but it is still time consuming, right? And we had lots of academics and conferences as well as other industry teams asking like, is there any way to do some kind of automation, or is there any way to just look at the heuristics instead of going through the cognitive walkthrough question by question? So we started looking at, can we automate the process? And yes, we could. What we did, this is an open source tool, so contributions are welcome. We automated a vertical slice of GenderMag. Right now, it takes Abby as the persona. And you might have noticed whenever I talked in the beginning, I used Abby. We always say it's good to start with Abby because more often than not, it's Abby's facets that are unsupported. Right? If you have time, you should do Abby and then Tim. But if you're constrained for time, at least do the Abbies, because more likely than not, it would be the Abby facets that are unsupported in the teams. One of the other things we found was information processing style. A lot of stuff we do nowadays is information heavy. So we picked the information processing style as the one facet to code for. And then we have done the evaluations on CS courseware as well as GitHub projects, open source project. So the idea of the tool is there are 5 decision rules for the open source one, and 2 of them are very specific to open source. So we use the remaining 3 for the courseware. So there are these decision rules that the tool uses. You give it the software, you give it the sub goal and action, the way I used in the example of the bookstore. So that's the write-up. And the tool then uses this decision rule to see if any comprehensive information processors would find inclusivity bugs. And then the way it is done right now, we have an earlier version where it just throws a Excel sheet of scripts of bugs for the open source one. But people wanted, when we wanted to do for the courseware, they wanted a little more interaction with the tool. So right now what we have is there's a landing page, you give it the web page or the URL of what you need to look at it. It runs the decision rule and it can tell you if there was a violation found or not found. If a violation is found, you can click on it to look at the results. It shows you where the UI is, which of the rules was violated and why. So in this case, what's happening is one of the decision rule it looks like is, okay, you gave the sub goal text, right? Find a bookstore, a map, and then you gave an action, which was browse off. How there's a word mismatch, semantic word mismatch, and therefore the human would be confused, or Abby would be confused that she's not seeing the bookstore map. In this case, this was on the courseware. The thing that they had asked the student to do was look at the schedule, but the action was to click on, say, the syllabus. Right? So there would be a word mismatch. Would the syllabus actually have the schedule, or it would be somewhere else? So this is a possible inclusivity bug. Another thing to know about inclusivity bugs is unlike bugs in software, which is a failure, these are not failures, right? So these are constant hurdles and cognitive taxes that the Abbies of the world have to face. It's not that Abby would not know, oh my God, if she sees a syllabus, not look at it, but this is extra thing like, oh, should I look for schedule first? Oh no, there's nothing on the schedule. Oh, let me start looking at maybe the syllabus has it, maybe something else has it, right? It just takes this extra time and extra processing that the Abbies have to do. So these are not insurmountable failures, but it takes this constant extra cognitive tax, which adds up. Okay, right. So we did evaluation with 9 courses. We supported the online instructors. We have a core program at OSU, which is eCampus. It's for post-bac students. So there's a whole slew of courses. GenderMag is very popular in OSU now, so there were a lot of instructors who were interested. We did 9 courses evaluation with them, so it's kind of action research. And they found, I believe, 29 bugs, out of which 24 included in the action steps. What we then did was we took all those problems, and this is part of the ICER paper, to kind of find out, because this is, I believe, the first time we have a paper that's talking about inclusion bugs in courseware. We categorize them into 6 categories, and one of them is as simple as, just assuming the student knows as well as the instructor the course. And this was just, newcomer unfriendly or unconventional navigation. As an instructor, I created my courseware what makes sense to my information architecture, but it might be unconventional, and newcomers like Abby are getting kind of confused and not sure what to do. Let me look at my notes here one bit to give you a little more data. So the tools so out of the 24 action steps that the humans did in the evaluations, there were 11 that were about information processing, and the tool was able to find 75% of those problems, right? So it's doing pretty good based on just 3 decision rules on information processing. It was also interesting that some of these facets kind of coexist. So tinkering and learning by process versus information processing kind of go hand in hand. So the 75% accuracy was actually also finding other bugs that would come from a different facet. And here is an example of an instructor looking at the tool, seeing the problem, and then saying, oh, if I hadn't looked and you said, do you think it's easy for the students to find a schedule? I would say, yeah, absolutely. But now I'm not so sure, right? And what they had done, this was an online course. They had a start here module that talks about everything, but the schedule was actually put in week 1's courses, in the week 1 module. So they expected, okay, the students will come, start working on week 1, see the schedule. But the Abbeys, right, they don't like to tinker around, and they're also comprehensive information processors. It would have been nicer if the schedule or the overview was, outside of week 1 before they actually started working on week 1. So that was a small fix of just taking the schedule page and putting it at a higher level where it could be seen. So this kind of wraps up my talk. I think I'm a little early, but it will give us more a chance for conversation. So what GenderMag does, it gives you a systematic approach of the why, where, fix model to find why an inclusivity failure could be occurring, right? It's because some facet is not being supported. Where in the process, where in the tool, in the documentation, where in the UI you have the problem, and how can you go about fixing it? GenderMag, we are very proud to say, has been popular. It has 45 countries that have at least downloaded the kit. It's available in gendermag.org. It is free. I ask anybody interested to go down, download the kit. There are a lot of other resources available too. Like we have started a design catalog where we are collecting all the before and after studies that we have seen or others have done or we have done, and collecting a set of templates, design templates of how to fix problems. So that's out there. Time and again, this is not the first study. We have seen if you do GenderMag, you can make your product better. You can make your product equitable, right? So Abbeys get supported better, but in the previous versions, oftentimes Abbeys are not supported. And because of the distribution of the genders in the studies we have done, and Abby facts that they're actually supported better, you are supporting women better. So this becomes gender equity or equality, right? And the most interesting part is that this inclusivity fixes using GenderMag does just one population at the expense of another. Instead, it is producing positive effects across across the different facet values, right? This is the idea of the curb cuts. It makes the product. And to wrap it up, right? So we had some conversations before, like, should this be only gender? Should we look at diversity? I'm seeing more and more people, and this is awesome, looking at different dimensions of diversity. So if you're interested either in GenderMag, you have the product made, you can download it, you can play with it. But if you're interested in a diversity dimension that is not gender, you can do your own research here, right? So this is for researchers. You define the scope, the diversity dimension you're interested in, and there is usually, you can find papers that are talking about a specific segment. So we have started looking at socioeconomic statuses, and we are creating an SES mag. We have highlighted or identified 6 facets where high SES and low SES people differ. An obvious example is access to reliable technology, right? A lot of us, like right now in Zoom, I'm getting some notification that my internet is unstable. We just assume conferences will go well because everyone can have Zoom, right? But that's not always the case. In-person classes to on, it was right, did all to reliable technology to participate, right? And if not, how can we go, those with unreliable technology can still follow, right? Recordings, things like that. Constructive personal problems. And the other is a hard part to do, but I'm super interested, and I think we are starting to get to that, is doing research, parking it means that we need to thinking about personality, right? Those women and who are
She got disconnected. Let's wait for a few minutes.
This was classic case of unreliable technology here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Now
Yes,
Okay.
we can hear you now. Yeah.
Where did I lose you? Did I talk about intersectionality when I was on, or?
No.
No? Okay. Did I finish Inclusive Mag? Like, how you can pick a diversity dimension,
Yes.
derive your personas, and
The
then
sound
you can
was a
apply
bit distorted. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I was saying, like, we are doing SES mag, right? Where reliable technology, we just assume it'll work. And here, I didn't have reliable technology, and I lost you. But what I was trying to say was, we need to actually, in our research and our thinking, start thinking about intersectionality, right? There is research in CHI that they have looked at rural women in Bangladesh who are poor, and they do everything on their mobile phone, and it's not a fancy smartphone. They are like really old phones. So they are doing their banking, they are doing their conversations with their bank manager, bank person to get loans, all through this little, mobile phones. So how would the software actually work, right? Now it's like, and women have, other kind of constraints in global south, about constraints about how and who they can talk to, right? So intersectionality start playing into the software that we are creating and how our users are using it. But as I was saying in our previous discussion, it's a hard topic because these are sensitive populations. So how can you actually get access to them and talk to them? And also how you are segmenting the population could mean that you have very few people in the intersections. And then how can you take that data and generalize? As Vandana was mentioning before, like if it's really small population, we get so much of pushback that, hey, this is really small population, what do you learn from it? So this is a hard research, and I'm really happy to see like Brittany and Alicia have started working on it in software engineering. There's a lot of work in CHI going on intersectionality. This was my last real slide. I want to thank you, my research team, NSF. All the new kids are doing this QR code. So if you're a QR code person, you can click this and find it, or just try gendermag.org and you can find all the details we need. And thank you, and questions. I'll stop sharing screen, I guess.
Thank you very much for the wonderful talk. So it's now the time for question and answer. So Michael, you can ask.
Valentina, can I ask a question?
Sure, what is it? Can I ask?
Sorry, Lafita. Now, after so many hours, I don't know even my name. So I wrote the question in the chat, and I wonder if you have considered to commercialize GenderMag. So to put this beautiful thing into the market.
I don't think so. We want to keep it open because we want the world to be better, and we don't want to put it behind firewall. So no, we are not thinking. Also because one of the things what we have done is initially we helped anyone and everyone who wanted help with GenderMag. So we are not going to be able to do that. So we have started doing training workshops. So the GenderMag is free. You can take it, learn on your own. The kit is there, all the data is there. But we have started getting workshop requests, and we have actually done 2 workshops on paid workshops on GenderMag. So there is interest enough to actually see money. Money wasn't much, but it was really nice to see that people are willing to pay to actually learn about equity, right? So that was cool. The other thing we are doing is we are working with our OSU university, OSU IT, to not only do gender magging on their tools, but we're trying to put it into the procurement. So any tool that gets purchased by OSU would need to do something with gender equity, right? Either GenderMag or something. So if we can get that done, I think it's not paid, but that's amazing. And our university has been funding a graduate student for the last 3 years now. So
Congratulations, Anita. It's really amazing.
That's great.
But we are a little bit cheating here, right? If one person downloads a kit from Russia, we like, hey, Russia, it's all colored blue. There's a little bit of cheating going there. So one of the things I wanted to say, like, this project was actually conceived and started by Margaret Burnett, Dr. Margaret Burnett at OSU, and I joined the project. We are co-directors now, but she's an activist of gender equality, right? So we want to keep it open, and we take great pleasure. Like every month we look at our map and see, oh, one more person downloaded. So it's super cool.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. So any other question from our audience?
Yeah,
Miguel,
I have
yeah,
one.
Sure.
I've been using GenderMag for a few years now too. Thanks to Margaret, she talked to me about it like 4 or 5 years ago. And when I used that questionnaire that you have available on your website, I was wondering whether the scores that people get would evolve over time. And the reason I was thinking about this was I use it with some students and with some colleagues as well to gather the profile that I have according to those facets. And the facets that I got from colleagues were quite different from the ones that I got from students. And that got me thinking whether there was some background variable that I was not controlling exactly, like age, or for instance, the kids now grow up with cell phones, and that changes the way they think about solving problems. And I was thinking whether the professors that have a given profile are somehow shaping the profile, the GenderMag profile of their students because of the role model that they provide.
This is fascinating, actually, Miguel. This is amazing, right? This is where intersectionality comes up, and To be frank, I had not thought about it, but I think it's really true because now I am a very risk averse. I don't have the time to learn a new technology. I cannot keep up with this Insta or whatever new Twitch and whatnot is coming up, right? I just can't. But back when I was a student and a postdoc, like I got the Twitter, the first year Twitter came out, I got a Twitter handle, right? My Twitter is Sarma, it's easy. I got the Gmail the first time it came out, right? I was way more technology loving technophile, and now I just don't have the time, right? And I'm feeling older and older because every 2 years some new technology is coming. I can't keep up. There's just too many social media stuff, right? So I think you are right that age and maybe even the job level, like how busy someone is affecting this facet of where they fall. So that's why I think if we are so it's not that the facets are wrong, but I think age is something that might affect the facets. So if we are building a tool that is meant for, say, courseware for undergraduates, we should do the survey on the students, on the demographics of choice, and then try to make it. So as I say this, I'm realizing two things. One, the post-bac coursework where we have done the study, it is meant for post-bac. So there are a lot of older, non-conventional students, right? So just doing the facet survey on the undergrads in class might not translate as well to on campus, right? So this is a perfect case of looking at different sections of users and seeing if if the facet level changes from say high riskers to low riskers, it would still be fine, because what will happen is if you take care of the Abbeys and the Tims, we are good, right? Even if the young undergrads are all risk tolerant, the older people are risk averse, so you take care of both, you're doing good. But what interesting things might happen is with age, there might be memory issues, right? It's not just recall issues. It might not just be these facets, but also other things related to age that might affect your tool. And that's why it's important to look at, facets that affect, say, age, recall, concentration level, mobility because of age, and see if those also impact. So that's why one of the things we are trying to do, and we got such horrible reviews back from Kai, was we were trying to show intersectionality, right? If you do GenderMag on age or socioeconomic as well as gender, we could show that running them one after the other actually gets you the intersectional population. So we did a more theoretical stuff. We got brutally rejected. Now we are collecting some empirical data to show that intersectionality can happen. Long answer. So Miguel, you're right. I think other things do matter, and it is important we look at the actual user base to figure out how to build the software for.
Thank you.
Thank you. So from the audience, any other question or comment? Valentina, you have any question?
Not at all.
Okay,
it was a perfect presentation. Now you folks are really tired.
No, maybe la FIFA is completely tired. So my congratulations to la FIFA to exist.
No, it's 11 p.m. here. No, it's okay, no problem. Yes. And especially in the morning, I had another session, so it's a totally conference day today for me. Yeah.
And I'm worse than you. Tomorrow I have the flight to Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay. So I just wanted to know about the user base. Like I was just trying to just going through your website of the GenderMag. Like before the downloading, I need to put some information. I just wanted to. I just a bit curious, like who are mainly using or from which geographical area. So do you have any statistics, like who are the users?
We don't have statistics, but we
just
love
just an idea. Just an idea. Yeah, just an idea.
Yeah. So if you look at, am I sharing my screen or not yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So let me. Zoom, share screen.
You're having
No, one second.
internet
I need to just
issues.
figure out which screen to share and what to do, right? So,
Yeah, it's getting started. I think it will take some time.
yeah. Is it doing it?
We're seeing the Windows.
Oh, you're seeing the empty one? Okay. So we have so far 45 countries, but I don't have statistics how many people voted from each. So, you know, from the United States, from then Europe. So, and that's very much in part because Margaret has gone and given talks to Indian universities, and they have been starting downloading things and using it.
You're having some issues. I think you have stopped the screen sharing. When you are sharing your screen, we cannot hear you. Anita, would you please stop sharing the screen? I think you have some network issues. And
okay.
when you are sharing the screen,
so
we cannot hear you. Yeah.
You can't hear me. Okay. I think it's my internet.
No
it
problem.
sucks. I can go off the wire. Somehow my wired internet seems to be doing worse than wireless, but let me finish this. So if I showed you, like, we have 45 countries.
I saw it.
Most of our downloads are actually from United States because, you know, we get talks here more. In the US, open source companies as well as other companies who have looked at it. Brazil has university as well as companies. In the other countries that, as far as I'm aware of, they are mostly universities who are downloaded and looking at it for their classes or for doing research or finding things.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your elaborate answer. So, any other question from anyone? I think it's